before you guys get to see it starting to pop up. It does like one of those awfully exciting progress bars on my end, and it's like watching paint dry while it does the setup, and then we get to wait for some squirrels and satellites, and it looks like now it's live on my end. So if you go to Throttle Body Media, you should see a live thing that's basically just with the logo right now.
It just said, my end just says this channel doesn't have any content.
There's a weird glitch with YouTube because I actually tried bringing up your channel, and I'm like, oh, naturally, YouTube would be acting up. So I don't know if this ends up being one of those. If you guys can't pull it up pretty quick, Jason and I talked about doing a Facebook Live thing. If YouTube doesn't cooperate, we're gonna switch to Facebook pretty quick. But let's see.
Sure. Yeah, YouTube looks like it's fucking up.
Yeah, because I hit videos and it says 404 not found.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, the good news is John is here, and as far as whether you want to run YouTube or Facebook, Jason, that is your call.
What's up, everyone?
Hey, John.
Echo.
Yeah.
How's everyone doing?
Good.
Good.
Sorry, still at the shop, so long day.
No problem. We figured you were kind of running behind a little bit. So hey, Nicola, why don't you go ahead and, I mean, if it says that we're streaming, let's just go ahead and go, and maybe it'll come back or not. I don't know. But I can always just post it from the recording. Okay, so this is the Throttle Body Media podcast. This week we're going to be talking about car collecting, and my guests this week are going to be John Axe of Savage Garage and Detail Boutique, Hassan Hazer from Chicago Motor Cars, and Eric McClellan from Gearhead Daily and of Vinwiki fame, and an author, and many other talents like woodworking. So welcome, guys. Appreciate all of you being here tonight.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. So hey, so as we said, our topic today is going to be car collecting, and I'm interested to get each of your perspectives, kind of on cars you've had, if you've done any collecting or worked in amongst that, an interaction you've had with collectors. Obviously, a couple of you guys have had very sort of direct relationships with those kinds of guys, certainly. And then we're going to sort of talk about, cars from your experience that you think, are good, aren't good, and why, or newer cars coming up that are good. So those are some of the topics that we're going to cover. Real quick, let's do, kind of just a quick around the horn to kind of expand on, on who you guys are. So Eric, go ahead real quick.
Yeah, so I run Gearhead Daily. I've done did a TEDx once. I also written a couple books that you see behind me. I'm working on a third. Used to be an automotive journalist for about a decade or so, and kind of sad to see the print magazine going away. Still do some online stuff every now and then, but yeah, I've had a various number of cars. Cars have always been a part of my life ever since I kind of had my first one, and kind of won't ever go away. So I've done it. If anybody's if there's any job out there, I've probably done it in the automotive world.
Excellent. Okay, Hassan, how about you?
Hey guys, I'm Hassan. I work over at Chicago Motor Cars. Been a gearhead my whole life, since I can remember at least. And, working at Chicago Motor Cars for a little over a year now, but I've been working in the automotive industry probably 8 years. So definitely looking forward to talking about some collectibles.
Excellent. Thanks, man. Okay, and John.
Hey guys, so I'm John Axe from Savage Garage. So I've been always been a car fan my whole life, and then obviously we started Savage Garage last year, so that's kind of been blown up. And right now I'm currently running Detail Boutique. It's a new venture for us in Miami, Florida. And Hassan, pleasure to meet you. But Chicago Motor Cars is one of the cars I've bought from. Great place to buy.
There you go. Yeah, I was actually down by you guys in December. I saw the Chiron and the Ford GT.
Yep.
In the shop.
Yep.
So.
The Chiron is right here. Let me see if I can flip this around.
There you go.
Yep. Nice.
So this thing's a beast, obviously, with the interior. Then We have a couple of cars. There's the Gallardo from Chicago Motor Cars, obviously.
Oh, okay.
The 1M, and then, yep.
Yeah, it's funny. My Corvette that I own right now, I guess Ben from Wheels Boutique, he owned it for a couple months before I took hands on it. So
Nice.
yeah, so
It's such a small
world.
world like that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Well, again, thanks guys, all of you, to be in here. I appreciate it. So let's kind of talk first of all, kind of a general level set question here. What makes a good collector car? What do we think, other than an intangible part of something where there's sentimental, reasons why somebody likes a car, I guess, what's your take on what makes a good collector car? And John, maybe we'll start with you on that.
All right. In my opinion, like a good collector car, one is essentially a car that you're expecting to go up in value. Obviously, it's a car that you can own for a couple of years or forever, and then basically not lose any money. On top of that, you have the sentimental value. I think a lot of cars that are collector cars, they have some kind of emotional attachment for the generations. I don't know, like I'm 34 years old, so like when I grew up, the 2000s were a big car era for me. So like the cars like such Integra Type R or other things like NSX and so forth, those are the big cars that like we relate to generational. People that are older than me, they'll relate to the 60s cars, the 70s cars, the 80s. So you have to have like something that like maybe you had to have like on the wall when you were growing up. And that's something that you always wanted, and now that you can afford.
The poster car, yeah.
Yep.
I heard. I think I heard Randy talk about that with the Diablo that way.
Yes, that was one of his poster cars. I mean, the Countach and obviously he's a little bit older, but you have the Miura, and he was always into the Lamborghinis and stuff like that.
Right. Funny story about that, super quick. When I was growing up, my brother and my dad were always into cars, and we went to a place, I think it was called Studebakers or something, but it was like one of these like old like drive up, driving things like where the girls wear roller skates and stuff, and they did a poster shoot here, and this was probably the late 80s, and this was right when the Diablo came out, and they had a Diablo pulling out, they had a bunch of Countaches, and they had one of the Rambo Lambos there. And they had all these hot girls and roller skates and stuff and short skirts, serving up for like the poster shoot. And I still remember that. I mean, like for me, again, the Diablo was that way too. It was absolutely a poster car. And maybe I'm a little closer to Randy's age, but or somewhere in between there, but nonetheless, a good memory there. But okay, well, thank you. So Hassan, how about for you?
I mean, to me, it's always been like, from what I see, obviously what John was talking about, the generation, that's a really good point. But I think like, the biggest thing for me is like desirability and then low production numbers. People love having the exclusive cars, like, oh, you're not going to, if the car is like one of 500 or one of 300, you're not going to see this car when you're out getting groceries, or even if you go to a car show, you're not going to see it, So I think exclusive numbers are definitely a big deal for a lot of people, and, it definitely helps.
Yeah, completely makes sense. I've got some thoughts on that we'll sort of get into here in a little bit, I think, with some of the cars that we're going to kind of talk through. So sure. Great point. Eric, any thoughts from your perspective on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with John, and that's to say that, as the generations shift, that's when, they start getting a little bit of money, and then they can afford the car that they had in their wall. I mean, I had a Viper as my wall car, and I got one, and it was everything I thought it could be. It was awesome, but it has to give you something, some sort of reaction. And I see cars as to just expand on what everybody's already said, but I see cars as art, and you see two art pieces behind me. It's more than just the car itself. Like I look at my car now, and I look back and I go, damn, that's a good looking car. Or I had a 68 Camaro that I put some wheels on it, and I did some stuff to it, and I went, they just hit a home run. Just the lines of it are just perfect right out of the factory. And I think part of it beyond, just the collector, one of one, or, has all the options, or the best, prime example of whatever. I really think the car has to make you feel something. And that's what art does. Art makes you feel something. And when you feel something from art, you have to have it. And I think there's just something to it. And there's a reason why I have this picture of a drawing of Senna and not just a picture of Senna. The picture of Senna would be great, right? It would be fine.
Yeah.
But it's not him. That's not the essence of him. The essence of him is him with his hair on fire at 300 miles an hour. So that is the essence of who this guy is. And that's art. So to me, cars are art. And if it makes you feel something, you got to have it.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I think that's well said. That's the emotion that they evoke. It's like when you hear people say that a car looks like it's going fast even when it's standing still. It's that kind of feeling, I think. So I'm with you there. Okay, so then when we talk about people that are collecting these cars, and Hassan, I kind of want to start with you on this one because I think it's particularly relevant. We lost your video there, buddy.
Sorry.
No worries. So when we talk about collectors, there's different kinds of collectors that we're going to encounter. Certainly I think of guys that I've seen, either on the national stage or guys that I've seen locally, and there's a real differential there. I mean, I guess just to give you an idea what I'm thinking here, it's like, you see, like when I go to like Iron Gate shows, a local car condo place here in the Chicago area, you'll see guys with these beautiful garages, and you sort of tend to see this, this breakdown of, you got the classic car guys, you've got the racing guys, and you've got the exotic guys, and to some extent, it seems like sometimes, not always, but sometimes it's like never shall the two pass or the three pass, and I guess, Hassan, I'm kind of curious from your point of view, like, what have you kind of seen with different collectors, and what's your perspective on the types of collectors that are out there?
Yeah, sure. Like, Eric was saying, cars are an art. They, it's like kind of like music. There's a genre of cars that people like, whether you have the guys who are always into just race cars that aren't street legal, or your guys who are like into donks with big wheels or stuff like that. You have your people that it's like a taste, an acquired taste that you get. Like for me, for example, I'm a GM guy, and I could name like probably 10 cars that don't matter to anyone, but like they have a spot in my heart that I would definitely want to collect one day,
Sure.
And you kind of just, people have their genre in cars, and, they just want, whether it's like, here, for example, I used to work with Tom from Speed Inc., and he's got just like the generation thing. He's got a GNX, he's got a Regal T-Type. To me, those cars are cool, but they don't really do anything for me. But like to him, God, like, he'll like wash them every Sunday, even when they're not clean. So it's really just, it comes down to what people like. A lot of people are, set to brands, set to cars that appealed to them when they were younger. I see it as that most of the time.
Right. I gotcha. So John, I think another interesting kind of difference in collectors that I've seen, and, Randy at least kind of definitely falls on one side of the spectrum, where you have the guys that kind of get these pristine examples and they put them in the museum, and they, never shall they actually touch the road. And then you've got the guy that like, just can't stop doing burnouts, and it's just out there having a great time in them, which I think a lot of people can relate, at least, again, specific to Savage Garage. I mean, a lot of people can really relate to Randy, because you can tell he's just an everyday car guy that likes to get out there and do donuts and burnouts and have a good time.
Well, I also think that like when you're talking about collector cars and buying these dream cars that you'll always want to do burnouts and everything else, and I think a big aspect of it is that you have to factor that into the purchase of the car. Basically, you have to know, are you planning to put in the garage and then basically just look at it, or are you planning on putting in the garage and then actually driving it and using it and so forth? And that's something that you have to factor into the value of when you're buying the car, because it might make sense for you to buy the cheaper car that's out on the market. So you have the bottom value dollar, and it'll always be the bottom value dollar, and you can actually enjoy it and drive it. But then you always have like the top tier cars, like you'll see with the McLaren F1s, where some of them like the $5-10 million difference, and it's just in a matter of mileage or conditioning and so forth.
Yeah, I think, mileage is a tough thing there. I think in terms of, people getting these example cars and only being able to enjoy them so much because it does have a significant impact on their value. But then I think you see guys that just kind of say, screw it, I'm going to keep this forever, which I don't think always ends up being the case, but I can respect, Shmi, bringing his GT over to the US and driving it around the country, and just saying, screw it, I'm going to own it forever, or I'm going to repaint my AMG because I want to, regardless of what anybody thinks about that,
And I wanted to touch base on the mileage thing. And I mean, me personally, I would rather have a car that's been driven. And because like, if you let the car sit for too long, they start having issues. And then it's not a pleasant like experience when you basically, if you take it out every 6 months and something happens every time you take it out. If you actually take the car out every couple of weeks or 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it is, you're still lubing up the engines, the transmission, all the mechanical components. And for me personally, I'd rather buy the car that has more mileage, bottom tier, and actually get to enjoy it.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. And yeah, I mean, like from the standpoint of lubrication and belts and tires and, all of it. Yeah, it's all mechanical parts that need to be exercised regularly.
Yep.
And sorry to interrupt, I was just talking to my coworker yesterday, and these cars are athletic cars, and athletes need to exercise. You can't just expect them to run as good as they can when they've been sitting on the couch for weeks or months. So.
Yeah.
Well, it's not just athletic cars or sports cars. It's any car. I mean,
that's true.
I worked at a shop for a while, and we had this, I mean, seriously, little old lady would come in. She'd drop off her Buick Riviera that was 20 years old, had, and I kid you not, 5,000 miles on it. And all the ball joints were shot, all the tie rods, everything was frozen into place. She's like, I can't believe there's so much wrong with it. I never drive it. Cars need to be driven. That little pivot, needs to move every once in a while to get it to, not freeze up or rust out on you. So yeah, drive it a little bit. I don't got a million miles on it, but
that is what is perplexing though. Like, and again, I don't have a whole lot of sympathy for him, but like, how does Jay Leno like make it work? You know what I mean? I mean, what's he got? Like literally hundreds of cars. Like, and I know he has like staff and everything, but
he's got a full-time mechanic, at least one that I know.
Yeah, but he's still got like hundreds of cars. I mean, like, you got to wonder like in the, we're going to get into some of the maintenance aspects. Maybe we'll keep that for the maintenance aspects a little later, but yeah, there's a lot I think that goes into the maintenance of a collection, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But,
oh yeah, for sure.
Just in terms of kind of thinking through again what we were sort of alluding to earlier, you've got a really big spectrum of types of collectors, I think, where you've got people like Randy that I think are somewhere in the middle. They like a mix of cars, they drive them, they get out there, and they don't have so many that like it's still manageable for a person to use them, and he's willing to do so. And then you have people on the extremes like a Jay Leno or a Ralph Lauren, where there's so many cars there and they're so valuable, so ultra rare that it's like at some point you just go, yeah, okay, well, those are art pieces at that point. They're not really cars anymore, and they're really never going to drive again. And then I find it really interesting too. I mean, kind of coming from like a muscle car background, you see some of the Tim Allens of the world, or James Hetfield is a guy I like to reference, who takes classic cars and totally remolds them and like customizes them, and
Billy Gibbons.
Things. Yeah, Billy Gibbons is a great example, right? Yeah, like the old Cadzilla and stuff like that. I remember that.
Oh yeah.
And I just think cars like that are so cool. I mean, even though it's so far away from the kind of stuff I'm into now, at least on a regular basis in terms of what I own, it's still, those cars to me are really stirring and amazing. And people get out there and drive that kind of stuff. I just have a lot of respect for, because they don't shy away from that. They get out there and use it, So, okay. Now, in terms of, Hassan, I guess one other thing I'll ask you kind of on that same topic is, obviously CMC's got a really varied clientele, certainly nationally and whatnot, as John was kind of indicating. I mean, any interesting stories or anything you can impart? I mean, in terms of any kind of collectors you've come across there, or anything funny in that way?
I mean,
Curious.
it's, from what I can, we have a bunch of people that it's crazy. They are watching, they have notifications set on eBay, Auto Trader, Cars.com, and they have these filters set so specifically on cars. As soon as a car pops up on our website, and here, from the moment we cut a check to a person we're purchasing a vehicle from, it's on our website. So once it's on our website, it gets advertised through all of the internet websites where you can look for cars. So I
need an Auto Tempest sponsorship right here.
We're one of the biggest eBay sellers. I think we're number 2 on eBay as far as eBay presence.
Yeah.
And we get a call right away. Oh, what color is it? Does it have this option? Does it have that option? And then if it's the car they're looking for, they'll just have us ship it directly from where we're purchasing it to their garage.
Yeah,
So,
I see the way that you guys advertise, like on Facebook, for instance, and I see these times where you just say, "Hey, we have this coming in." You don't even get specifics on it, and then you're like a couple hours later, you're like, "Congratulations to Bob," and God knows where he just was,
and it happens.
Got here.
Yeah, we use Facebook a lot for that stuff, and we try to make it as easy as possible. We're not like the typical used car salesman where we're going to play tricks to get you to buy a car that we know what we have. Our customers are 90% of our customers are car enthusiasts looking for a specific vehicle. So it really helps. And, so a funny time was I took three calls on one car, and, all 3 parties were fighting over this car. And we work on a first come, first serve basis. Someone's like, "What's your bank information? I'm wiring you guys right now." And the other guy's like, "Well, I'm going to fly my personal aircraft to you guys. There's an airport close by, the Schaumburg airport." He's like, "If you can pick me up from there, I'll get the car this weekend." I'm like, "No, I can't promise you the car's still going to be here, but if it is, it's all yours." So
that's crazy. Yeah. And it's just funny to see how fast some of this stuff goes. But like you said, people, when they're looking for something uber specific, and then boom, it pops, and they've got the capital, obviously, they're like, let's go. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it is, I will say, John, I mean, it's been pretty interesting seeing, Randy kind of go on this tear with the cars that he's been getting and everything. I mean, just some crazy high caliber stuff,
Yeah.
But so let's talk through some different car brands. I'm kind of curious to kind of get your guys' take on cars either that you think are good collector cars, and why, or recent cars that will be, or cars that you think really are starting to kind of lose their luster in that way, and kind of tried to think of it through from the standpoint of the different brands of cars and things like that. So let's talk about Porsches, for instance. I think that's always an interesting one to me, because I always joke as an Audi guy that unless you're talking about RS models or like a 918, that Porsches are Porsches, which I know is BS, but it's fun to say to poke people. But
they're the Glocks of the car world.
Sure, yeah. So Eric, let's start with you. What's your take on Porsches, and kind of from a collectability standpoint? Does anything stand out to you, or is anything poison for any reason?
Yeah, so any of the cars, I think from the late 90s, kind of pre that. I mean, those air cooled ones are there. There was a time you could get those for like $5-10 grand. Now suddenly they're just going insane with those prices. They're not typically great cars to drive, so I guess I don't quite understand the appeal with those air cooled ones. They're snap oversteer is a real thing, and you can die. Just saying. And some of the ones in the 2000s were okay, I think if you're going to collect any of them, it's got to be the GT cars, GT2, GT3, the ones you can actually drive on the street without, getting mobbed by people. Like you said, the GT. Yeah, there you go. Like the Singers. I love the Singers. Those things are gorgeous. I had a 79 slant nose, and it was great. It was fun, but it wasn't a particularly great car to enjoy. I like them. I think the Porsches are great. I think they're fun little cars. But to me, unless you go with a turbo model or a GT model, they're very gutless. They don't have a lot of power. There's a Porsche dealership near me where I've test driven a couple of them, and they've given me the keys because they kind of know me by now. And it's just kind of they're dentist cars. They're just kind of meh. My neighbor's got one. He's got a Carrera 4S. Mm-hmm. It's neat. That's it. I mean, it's neat.
It's cute.
But it doesn't do anything for me. But if you had a turbo 911, like within the past 15 years, that that made 6 some odd 100 horse, hell yeah. There's a place near me that they run a racing program. So you pay them a couple $1,000. They'll take your car to a racetrack, and then they'll be your pit crew for a couple grand for a weekend. And they build these insane TT Cup cars that 600-700 horsepower that they'll build for you, maintain for you, and then take them off to the track. That would be a fun car. But your average 911, your Boxster, they're fine.
Well, I kind of wonder, like the air-cooled Porsche, I think, is one of those good examples where that's a car where its time has kind of, come in the last, I don't know, whatever it is, 10 years or something. Because easily. Again, I think a lot of people generationally, they remember those cars or aspired to those cars when they were younger, and it kind of came. And I wonder, and again, it could be years from now, and maybe the effect of time overrules it, but like, does the time of that car pass at some point where the new generations people just go like, whatever, and like, well, what we saw that down the road.
Yeah, we saw that with the muscle car thing, the Barrett Jackson thing. People were going insane for all these old 60s cars, even cars that didn't have any, provenance or anything like that. So, and then, in the last 5 or 10 years, what we're seeing is stock cars that are like, the pinnacle of their brand. Sure, that's the high price, but everything else is starting to fall in value. And the thing that's going up in value are the pro touring ones and the modified muscle cars from that, because people want the style, because they love the lines of it. A million times, they don't make cars like this anymore.
They want modern suspension and
they want an LS motor. They want air conditioning. It should turn,
Turning is good. Yeah.
And it should turn when you want it to, not a week and a half from now, So I mean, before I rebuilt my Camaro, you could turn the steering wheel 10 degrees and the wheel would not move. Just the tires wouldn't move.
Wow.
So, yeah. So the value, I think, if you're going to, we're talking about, driving a car and having a good time with it. I think those, resto mods are probably going to be your better one. But yeah, I think there's going to be a time coming up where folks look at the air-cooled Porsches and go, yeah, they're neat.
Yeah, I got you. Hassan, any thoughts on that? On Porsches generally?
I mean, yeah, I personally, I'm I never was the biggest Porsche fan until the recent years. And I definitely, as I was saying earlier, they have the exclusive cars every now and then, like the 911R, how they just skyrocketed, or how the GT2 RS was when they had first come out. I think they definitely do a good job with holding value. They do it is a good car. You just got to know what it is to really appreciate it. And a lot of my Porsche clients love Porsches because they're very under the radar, which, they can go to work without being judged. If they show up to work in a Ferrari, everyone's going to be like, wow, he gets paid way too much. If you show up in, like, let's just say you show up in a 911 Turbo S with a $220,000 option, people are just going to think, oh, it's just a $90,000 Porsche. A lot of people don't know the difference between the two. And
that really is the conundrum with Porsches, because on the one hand, if you want to be low key, you can be, But the opposite side of that is it's like people just think it's just another Porsche, and if that's not your thing, then it's kind of like, any takes on Porsches, John?
I actually have. I mean, I can go on this forever. I'm actually a Porsche guy.
Excellent.
And I think Porsches in general, for me, are split up into 3 sections, I guess you could say. You have the air-cooled era that ends with the 993. And then you have another era, in my opinion, that basically goes from 993, which is the 996, and then you have the 997. And then it kind of ends at the 991. And then the 991 and up is a different era in itself. Because the 996 and the 997 era, in my opinion, is the best Porsche you can buy right now, because you get the best of both worlds. You get the old technology, the old feel, like not electronic, not anything, and then it's not too big, it's still mechanical, it feels natural, and you still have all the technology behind it. The 991 became too big, and it just doesn't feel as involved anymore to me personally. The GT cars, obviously, I think they're all going to be a safe investment. 991s, they make them way too many of them.
Question for you about the GT cars. Do you think the turbo or naturally aspirated versions? I mean, do you see a significant price differential between those two?
There's a very big price differential, and then what I see is because I used to have a 997 turbo. I think the 996 turbo is already. If you look at the prices, it's already crept up like $20,000 in the last 2 years. The 996 turbo you have that. I think in the long future might be something interesting because it's got the eggshell headlights, and no other 911 has that. So that could be a collector thing because you either love it or hate it. But I think the 997 turbo is the most underappreciated collector car right now. The 997 is basically the last turbo that ever made a manual option. Ignore the Tiptronic. And the dual clutch.
Right.
And you don't think, I hear people talk about it, and I want to get into Ferraris in a minute, but that whole debate of, kind of the last naturally aspirated cars, versus the turbo ones. I mean, do you think
that's definitely going to be it? That's definitely going to be it. But the whole thing with the turbo is that the turbo is always going to be like considered the turbo. So it's like the higher level trim option, whatever.
Gotcha.
And the whole thing with the 996 and the 997s is that if you just throw a tune and exhaust on it, it's as fast as the modern car. So the 997, the reason why I think is the most underappreciated car, the 996s are basically the same price, like pristine condition ones, as a 997, almost the same condition. And mileage for mileage, same thing, but the 997 is a much better car. The 07 to 09 turbos came with the Mesger engine. So those Mesger engines, as you all know, are historic, and there's a big history behind that. But the 09, specifically the 2009 Porsche Turbo, is the best investment, in my opinion, right now. Because the 2009 Turbo basically had the Mesger engine from the 90s and 2000s. And then you also have the 997.2 interior upgrade in that body. If you look at the 2008 and then, 2010, 11, 12, the 997.2 Turbo, they went direct injection, so you don't have the Mesger engine, the sound, the mechanical feel. So I think the 09 Porsche Turbo is a solid investment in manual.
Okay, you heard it here. Fantastic.
Yeah, turbo for sure, John. You're totally right. And I've driven the non-turbo versions, and they're boring. They're boring. They don't want to kill you. I have tried to power slide one around downtown Minneapolis, and it won't do it. The ass end will not move. But Eric, it's got 300. Full crap. It's slow as hell.
What about like the GT3 though? That's non-turbo, and that car is.
Yeah. Okay. That's a little different. I'm talking your pedestrian. The GT cars get their own category.
Yeah. Okay.
The non-GT, non-turbo, are for people who want to be seen in a Porsche.
I totally agree.
Yeah. Look at me. I've got a Porsche, everybody. Yeah. Nice.
And I don't know if any of you have ever driven a 997 turbo with like the factory short shifter and just the tune and exhaust. It goes warp speed. It literally, like I call it warp speed.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Porsche is something, I've I have my thoughts about them, but I have not driven many, and I want to experience more of them. So it's kind of one of those things on my list. But
it's the best all around car. Period.
I've heard so much about them, from people that are just fervent fans. You don't hear like a lot of extreme hate. You just hear about people that really love them. So
Yeah.
I definitely get it. We've got a big, PCA club around here, Porsche Club Chicago or Porsche Club of America, presence in Chicago. So want to check more of those out. But anyway,
They're
going
amazing.
back to talking about people that want to be seen, let's talk about Ferraris. Okay? So with Ferrari, a buddy of mine, Dennis, just bought a 458, and this is Dennis Mark that was on Crown with us, John, last year. He had an i8 on Crown. So Dennis just got a beautiful, pristine resale red 458. Okay, I think it's a 15 or 14. I don't remember exactly, but
It's a nice car.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. And he had been talking to in our Crown chat group about pondering a 488 or a 458, and this is one of those debates that I feel like is still kind of raging right now, and not quite as much as when the 488 came out, obviously. But, there's this big divide between, the last naturally aspirated Ferrari, as far as I recall, versus, going to the turboed. And I'm kind of curious for the perspective on that, Hassan, like what's your take on the 488, 458, kind of debate?
So it seems like, people definitely have that soft spot for 458s, and even the Speciales, they're still selling for a lot of money. And, people do love here. I took a call from a gentleman. This is kind of funny. We had a white 458. It was 2013 with 1,900 miles. It had already sold before it even got to the dealership. And, he told me his wife has a GTC4 Lusso, and he wanted a 458 for himself. And I'm like, I have another one. It's a little higher mileage. He's like, no, I want a low mile one. I'm like, I have a low mile 488. He's like, no. He's like, if Enzo Ferrari was still alive, he would never turbocharge an engine. I'm like, well, did you, the Ferrari F4, I didn't want to, ruin his day, but the F40 was twin turbocharged, and that's one of my favorite Ferraris ever made, for sure. And I think a lot of people have that purist mentality where they think the naturally aspirated is definitely the way to go, and I agree to that at some point, but it everything eventually is going to be turbocharged, and you can have that last memorabilia when things weren't turbocharged, because we are going to lose naturally aspirated V8s. And I think that's what people have in mind, and I think that's what they kind of go for. They want to have that, the last of the last.
Yeah. We were touching on that before, and I think you're absolutely right that, I think the 458 will hold a special place in people's hearts because of that. I know, I personally, I looked and tried to, to find 458s. I was looking at them actually at CMC, and thinking about them, and they were just a little bit out of reach for me, kind of price wise, with what I was looking at. But I personally think the 458 is one of the most beautiful cars ever made.
I agree.
Again, my personal preference, but I just love them. I think they're amazing. It just
I
a
think,
little bit out of reach for me.
Yeah, and I think Ferrari did a great job with the 458. It feels like a motorcycle with four wheels. It's got an exhilarating experience for being naturally aspirated and having the power it has. It's definitely, I think it was way ahead of its time. And if you just look at the 488, the design and the engineering, it seems like Ferrari couldn't make the 458 much better because it was already such a good starting point.
Well, Ferrari always has that tendency to do that. It's the same thing with the 360, and then you have the 430. The 360 is a sexier body, in my opinion. The 430, it's always the original body gets tweaked, and they never do it as well. The F12.
It's a refresh. Yeah.
Yeah. The F12, I think, is a sexier body, Pininfarina design. The A12, I think, is not as pretty. But the 458, I think the reason why is that natural aspirated engine just feels more mechanical, and it feels more special when you drive that car. The 488, it just feels like a nicer version of a 570, if that makes sense, with the turbochargers and everything else.
Yeah.
So if you look at and I think the used values reflect that, because you can get a 488 used for the same price as essentially a nice 458.
Yeah, I agree. And I just drove my first 488 this week, and like my first impression on that car was it feels like a 458 and a 911 turbo had a baby. Like that's my,
For me, it's like essentially like if it's like a McLaren had a budget for development. Does that make sense?
Yeah, they didn't just throw things together.
Yep.
Oh, we're gonna get to McLaren's. Don't worry.
McLaren's like don't.
Yeah, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. Don't worry.
You guys are gonna hate me when I say this, but if I had to pick one Ferrari, it would it's the one I when I was like 20, I saw one, and it was silver with blood red interior, and it was a 575 Maranello.
Oh, don't start there.
They're awesome cars.
You can't start there.
What? Why? Why not? What's wrong? What?
No, there's nothing wrong with it. It's the Bad Boys too.
No, it's actually from the movie Family Man with Nick Cage and Tay Leone. Yeah.
I just watched that like 2 weeks ago again.
Yeah, he drives up in that gunmetal, and he's like, my Ferrari, and he's talking about it. And I'm like, that's my car. That's the one I want. I know it's front engine and it's rear wheel drive. I don't care. It's,
the 575, I think, in my opinion, is like one of my favorite Ferraris as well.
Yeah, easily.
It's gorgeous. It just
got that shark face. It just.
What's your guys' takes? Shifting gears, but still within the Ferrari lineage here a little bit. What's your guys' takes on Testarossas? Because that was another poster car from when I was a kid. Miami Vice and the whole deal, right? And I saw some of those like at Supercar Saturday and whatnot last year, and I had not really seen a whole lot of them up close in a really long time. And I got to tell you, once I saw it, I was kind of like, this thing's a land boat, man. I mean, they're really big, they're really boxy, and it's like, I don't know, like when I look at like an F40, and F40 has aged so well. That car still is just sex on wheels. But like the Testarossa, like I feel like it's age has not been kind to it from a design perspective.
Well, I think
the Testarossa is the Testarossa is the epitome of don't meet your heroes, straight up. I think they're beautiful to look at. They look awesome, but I've ridden in one. I've never driven one. It's extremely underwhelming. I remember that was it that Cruising USA video game or Crash, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Remember that game from the 80s? And you'd flip and the girl would fly out and all that, that good stuff. You would think this thing goes 1,000,000 miles an hour, and you get in and it's just brrr.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that like the thing, like I think the values reflect the whole feeling of Testarossas and the 355s. The Ferraris, in the old ages, in my opinion, had you had the hypercars, like the F40, the F50, and the Enzo and so forth, which are completely different level than the Testarossas and the 355s and the Dinos of those years. And the problem with those things, the Testarossa, 355, or anything else, they seem cheap on paper. But anything before the 360, you have to do engine out service every 3 years. And you're looking at a full engine rebuild every 15,000 miles. And is it worth to do that on a Testarossa every 3 years? No. But on a 40, at 50, it's a whole different topic. So then that's worth it. And that's why I think those values in the Testarossas, 355s, the 308s and so forth, I don't think they'll ever go anywhere above 100, just because the experience is not worth the money that costs to maintain it.
Now a car, and maybe a good transition point here then is to talk about Lamborghinis and is to talk about the Countach. Now the Countach, again, kind of still a little earlier, but kind of that same ilk. But I feel like its time, has kind of come in the last so many years, and there's really that hunger for them again. Whereas I think there was at least some point in time where they were sort of attainable, whereas now they're really sought after. And I feel like people still feel like they've aged really well. I mean,
why?
I don't know.
I'm legitimately asking this question when you could buy this for, I don't know, whatever, 200-300, whatever they're going for, or buy yourself a modern car. I don't get it. I do not understand the appeal of these.
John or Hassan will certainly have perspective on this, I know, but
Yeah.
everything I've ever heard on this,
Tell me, please.
is that yes, they're uncomfortable. Yes, you can't see out of them and all the rest of it. and yes, they want to kill you, but that's the reason you love them, because they're so like, they're a raging bull. They're just untamed. I mean, like, John, take it away.
I mean, I personally think
maybe you don't like it. I don't know. You know, I mean, like, it's not. I know it's not your car.
I mean, I'm a weird guy. Like, I mean, maybe it's my age factor, but I don't really care for cars older than the 80s, like 70s, 60s, 50s. I just don't really care for them because the technology kept getting on. And then once 2012, 13 hit, I don't care pretty much for any car after that fact either, because they all become so electrical and we can't, like, all the assists and all that stuff. I hate it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Countach, I think, is the last car of the Lamborghini era that, and right now, I think that there's a big hype with the whole Wolf of Wall Street and everything else. So like you have that, like that nostalgia.
It brought the car back into the consciousness, kind of. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for me personally, I hedged my money on the LP 550-2, which is basically an iteration of the Balboni car. The leftover manual transmissions, and it's rear-wheel drive, pure, and it's gated transmission. Like, in my opinion, it's a better car than a Huracan because I get more enjoyment. It's more mechanical. It's more thrilling to me, and there's more drama. The Diablos of the era, I think every single one of us had a poster on the wall of the Diablos. So I think the Diablos, they have a long ways to go in price-wise, and they were pretty rare. The number of the production values they made, because Lamborghini didn't really make many cars until the Gallardo came out, the pre-LP. Yeah, and that's when they started making the money.
But that rear wheel arch, man, it's weird. It's really weird.
and the funny thing is, the wheel arch it's the same chassis on the Murcielago, and you still get the same wheel arch on that.
Really?
But like,
I never noticed
if you drive a Murcielago, it feels like a kit car. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's essentially like a production version of a kit car, and I can get into later. Like I have the same feelings of a Koenigsegg. Like, it's not like a disrespect to those cars. It's more of like, nothing exists of that nature. So you want to create something that doesn't exist, and that's how they make it. Yeah. And
it's got those horrible US spec bumpers too.
But to your point there, God, I almost called you Jimbo, John. Sorry. Thinking about the Mercy though, like that was another car I was looking at, because again, there are examples of those that are attainable, and the clutches the clutches just scare me though. You know, I mean, being a guy on a budget, I just.
Yep. In the long term, it's cheaper to buy a pre-LP manual car than to buy an e-gear car and then hold on to it long term, because in the long term, you're gonna switch like 8 clutches for a single manual clutch, maybe more. And but I think once the Aventador replacement comes out, I think you're gonna see the Mercy and the Aventador, all of those skyrocket, like the special edition Aventadors, not the 2012s, the regular ones, because the next
not those common Aventadors.
Yep. And because the next one, the replacement, is not going to be a V12, and it's going to be a hybrid drivetrain. So I think that people are going to
end of an era. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's the same thing as like the A12 Ferrari and the F12. Like the A12 Ferrari is the last V12 Ferrari we'll ever see. Natural aspirated.
Yeah. Crazy stuff. Hassan, any thoughts on anything else related to Lamborghini?
I personally, I love the Lamborghinis. Great cars for what they are, and we just actually took in this. It's like a dark green Performante with bronze wheels.
I saw that. That thing is beautiful.
God, it's probably one of the best looking cars I've ever seen. It's just, it shocks me that like they haven't hit that exclusivity like as a company. Like Ferrari's done it, and Porsche's done it, and the Lamborghini's just as old, but like maybe the Miura.
Well, do you think though that they got almost like with the Gallardo? Do you think they almost got like a little too popular and sort of lost a little bit of the cachet?
I think so, and I was reading somewhere that in the 3 years or 4 years that they made Huracans, they've surpassed the amount of Gallardos that they had for over a 10-year run.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's owned by Volkswagen Group, and I'm sure, Volkswagen's seeing it more as a profit, which I'm sure they're making a ton of money.
Especially with your.
Yes.
Yeah, the car looks incredible. It's like, oh my God, it's, and for sure, like, the Performante is definitely a car, like, that for me, for my generation, that car, it was one of the fastest cars around the Nürburgring when it came out, and like, just looking at it, it's definitely a crazy looking car. And it wows me that, like, the Countach isn't worth millions of dollars. I don't know, like the F40 is, the F40 is like,
Yeah,
it just, I don't know. It doesn't.
It is interesting. You bring up a good point there. Yeah,
Yeah.
that those Ferraris have really, achieved such a status, and some of those Lambos just haven't gotten there. Maybe except for some of those super rare mirrors or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Or some of the very exclusive, Countaches or something like that. But yeah.
Yeah,
But
and,
I think
it might just be like the demographic of the buyers, because
exactly.
I think Ferrari guys are like the older gentlemen that want something finely engineered and more exclusive. And then, the guys, I love Lambos, but the guys who buy Lambos buy them to show off.
Yeah, no, and I think it kind of goes back to one of the things we were talking about earlier, that I think people get Lamborghinis and they'll put different wheels on them and they'll do fancy, aftermarket kind of stuff to them, and you don't see a whole lot of that with Ferraris. Certainly, anything older than the most new models, like, I feel like it's much more of that mentality of like, leave it as it is. It was perfect the way it came.
Yeah, and I feel like in the Ferrari community, it's actually frowned upon if you modify a Ferrari.
Go ahead, John. What were you going to say?
I mean, I think that, like, the Ferrari, the whole thing is the Ferrari has been a company that's been around for much longer, and it didn't come from a tractor builder, essentially.
No.
So I think that Ferrari, because of the racing lineage and so forth, like, I mean, Lamborghini never competed in Formula One.
That's true.
And obviously, like, Formula One, you have Ferrari fanatics because of that.
Yeah.
So I think the racing pedigree and everything else will prop up the Ferrari. But I think the typical owner of a Ferrari is a person that's we were talking earlier, collect it and then not drive it. The Lamborghini typical owner will actually drive the cars.
Gotcha.
I think there's another factor here, John, that that you said didn't get real popular until the Gallardo came out. And I think you're right, but I think you can blame Audi for the fact that they became
VW, not Audi.
VW, Audi, same difference. Sorry. So when they put the Beetle engine into the Gallardo, what they basically did was they made it profitable, but now it's made by Hitler, which is fine. I had one. But I, in all seriousness, no. I think you lost the exclusivity because now people saw it as a Audi. They saw it as an Audi, which is it essentially is. It essentially is an Audi underneath. It's got all the fancy bits on top. And they became popular. But if you look at Ferrari, they make Ferraris. Porsches make Porsches. They don't make the Beetle, the Golf. They don't make the competitor car that's almost exactly like it. Like, you can't go out and get a General Motors knockoff of a Ferrari. It's just not gonna happen.
But Porsche has some of that with VW, though. I mean, too.
Well, I mean, you have the Sledgehammer, the 500e.
You do. What, you have one example. But I think you can blame Volkswagen for kind of taking that exclusivity. They made it
profitable.
Yeah, they did. They did make it profitable.
But you're right. Yeah. You're right. It
Totally
became mass market, though, right? I mean, like
they made money.
The Empire assimilated them. I'm mixing Star Wars and Star Trek metaphors there, but they took them over and made them better. Yeah.
And me personally, I might be biased because I have an LP 552 manual, rear-wheel drive. So, like, I am biased in that aspect. But I think that the Gallardo was honestly the best iteration of a Lamborghini. Because if you drive, like you said, the Volkswagen, yes, I agree with you. But the Volkswagen thing brought the reliability to the Lamborghinis.
Yes.
So you can actually drive them and be reliable.
Totally.
Now, if you drive the Gallardo, the LP especially, because the LP was kind of, in my opinion, an advance of a time because it was competing with the 430. It smokes. I mean, my car personally, I can beat a 458, no problem. And it's completely original stock. It's faster than a 458. The whole thing is that if you drive an R8 and then drive an LP 552, you have the best of both worlds. You have the reliability of the R8, but then you also have the character of the Lamborghini. Now the Huracan,
I agree with you there.
And then the Huracan came out, and like that's why I don't care at all about Huracans, is because that car just does everything like a Volkswagen Golf. Like you drive it, there's no drama. It shifts. It's dual clutch transmission. It just, you can put like 80-year-old grandmother.
It's refined,
and she can run a 10.4 quarter mile. 80-year-old lady first time driving it. You know what I mean?
Well, that's why I sold my R8. It was boring. It was boring. And Jason, you and I were talking about this earlier about modifying your car, and I got my R8. It was a 4.2 V8.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, okay, so I came from Corvette stuff. So, you know, there's aftermarket this and there's aftermarket that. And I go out there and I'm looking, I'm like, all right, so what can I do to my R8? I can put wheels on it, or I can twin turbo it.
Or a VF supercharger.
That's it. I mean, but that's it. There's nothing in between. There's nothing to do to it.
You can do a tune to it, but I hear you.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Where do I buy heads?
Now,
right? You know,
what year R8 did you have?
I had an 09.
09. So it was a V8, right?
Yep. Entry level.
So it's actually a funny story. Before I bought the Gallardo LP 550-2, I actually ordered an R8 RWS. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it.
Yeah.
I thought that was going to be a car that was going to be kind of a return to glory, whereas you get the R8 V10 performance and blah, 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 but it's going to be rear-wheel drive. And I thought it was going to be more natural. And then Chicago Motor Cars contacted me, and they're like, oh, we have this LP 552. So I backed out of that deal. And the R8 is not being made next year anymore.
Right.
But they're making double the number of the rear-wheel drives next year is the final edition. So they're going to make, I think, 1,200 of the rear-wheel drive versions for the final edition. So I think that's kind of an interesting perspective that the rear-wheel drive kind of changes the whole dynamics in an R8.
Well, it does.
No, for sure. Yeah.
And if you look at like even the GT3 races over in Europe, you've got all the, you know, the hypercar factories racing over there, but they have to be rear wheel drive. So even the GTR has to be rear wheel drive, the Gallardo and the whatever it is, the 488s, then they all race in that series, which I think is fantastic, by the way.
Yep.
And they all have to be rear wheel drive. So it makes total sense why you would make the conversion.
Let me just show you guys what makes it specialness of this. Hold on a second.
Exhibit 1. Yeah.
That clicking will never, ever be made again.
Well, and let's talk about that for a second, because, you know, you brought up R8s. I didn't, you know, even though I'm definitely a devotee, you know, and I've had a 15 V8 and now I have a 15 V10 plus. They're both DSG. It is what it is, you know. But the manual R8 is becoming sought after, certainly, you know, for the gated manual and whatnot. My question though is, like, I think that is a popular car and it demands a bit of a premium, but I don't necessarily know that I look at that and say that that's a collector car.
It is a collector car once they end the production of it.
Gotcha.
Because once they end the production of it, there's no latest and greatest. And I think all cars kind of, you always have the generation that's current, and those are the people that buy it because they want to have the latest and greatest. And you have some enthusiasts. Once the next model comes out, that's when the previous version becomes kind of like the used car or whatever it is. And people are like, oh, I want it because it's like a cool car or whatever.
Yeah.
I think most cars, like once they become the third generation lineage, like old wise, that's when you start determining, is it a collector car or not? Because the third generation folks are going to be like, okay, I want to buy this because it's amazing long term. And then, or it's the people that just can't afford to maintain it, and those cars are going to go into salvage.
Well, it's interesting.
And it's got to be. Sorry, probably apologize.
No.
I think it probably will be a collector car soon, the manual versions. Yeah. Because
the auto version is just fun for 19-year-olds to go out and hoon in.
Yeah, exactly. And but I think it has a couple things going for it, which is when it first came out, it made a huge splash. I mean, Audi was boring as hell before that car came out, and that was their flagship car, and people went oohed and awed, and holy crap, look at this, and it was amazing. It was so amazing. I bought one, and so you've got that kind of collectability because it is kind of the iconic Audi that is attainable for everybody. So I think it will be a collector car, but when you look at not every last run of a car is going to be collectible. So like my old Pontiac Vibe. Yeah, it's not here anymore, and they don't make Pontiacs anymore. But nobody gives a shit.
The Aztec, yeah, right.
But
it was a Vibe. Calm down. I did not own an Aztec. Screw you.
I'm sorry.
Can I add one more thing to the R8 thing?
Yeah.
So the one more thing I want to add to the R8, another thing that it has going for it is the Iron Man.
Yeah.
And
it's also in 50 Shades of Grey.
But you know what though? Like I know, and believe me, like I follow like almost all the R8 guys on Instagram, and like the number of dudes with a Stark license plate, like I'm just kind of like, come on, guys, like, and I know that's a big segment of apparently of the R8 population of how they got into it. I mean, I got into it more from seeing the car introduced and like seeing it at the auto show and stuff like that. Like the Iron Man connection. I think I kind of missed that in like my age bracket or whatever. Like I saw it in there, but it was like,
do you know how I got my
before that?
You know how I got my R8? 50 Shades of Grey.
That's funny.
It's a true story. So
I've heard those stories, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So Gray or whatever his name is, the movies are god awful. Books are even worse. Where my wife and I are just curious, so we started watching it, and he shows up in a Spider R8, and my wife goes, "Ooh, I like that car." And as a car guy, that is 100% permission to go out and buy one.
Yep.
I did.
Okay, well, I could sit here and talk about R8s all day, believe me. But let's John, one more thing.
So you have more. All right, so you figure that first Iron Man came out, 2008 something?
Something like that.
Yeah, it would have been right around the premiere of the car, which was 08, 09, yeah.
So the age demographic that was falling in love with those movies, let's just say average age was 10 years old, that like you're Ooga and Gaga over those cars, right? So you're 10 years old. So 12 years have passed. So those kids are now 22 years old.
Yeah.
It's going to be another about 8 to 10 years before those people, the average demographic, is able to afford that R8 average. So in about 10 to 12 years, when they become 32 to 35 years of age, that demographic, I think that's when you're going to see the R8 prices starting to climb, because it's going to be, I remember that car as a kid in the movie, and I want that car now to relive that experience.
And John, you're totally right. And I think though, what's going to be desirable are the low production versions and the manuals. So now that people have money in that age group, those I think
will skyrocket. Exactly. I mean, I think because you've got that middle ground of people where you've either got young guys that have rich parents or they're sort of well-to-do people in their 20s, they're going out there and they're getting those true first gen, pre-facelift R8s, and I think those things are gonna, those cars are gonna be well used. Let's put it that way. They're gonna have a lot of miles on them.
Yeah, well used.
The pristine example R8 V10 manual is going to be worth a lot of money in the future, and especially that they're not going to make the R8 after 2021. It's going to, because the first generation is the most beautiful one.
Agreed. That's why I've had two of them. Yes,
it's gorgeous.
Hassan, let's take a turn here, and I'm going to put it to you, McLarens. The depreciation monster. So what are we seeing there? Because I
gotta go. No, I'm just kidding.
No, but I'm seeing a real resurgence in 12C love. I'm seeing people talk about the 12C really commonly now. And I remember when that car came out and people said, this car is not perfect. This car is very sort of wild, in addition to having mechanical problems at times.
Yeah. So like the biggest,
forgiven. Yeah, go ahead.
The biggest thing with McLarens is, like we were talking earlier, that Lamborghini has a parent company, Audi, Volkswagen Group, whatever. they have refined the little problems that, you know, like window switches or
You're saying McLaren needs to get bought?
No, I think McLaren needs more time, because the biggest thing is, like, here we had a brand new 570 GT, no miles on it, or like 2,000 miles on it, and you know, just little stuff I noticed in the car that were just like not perfect, and I judged the whole brand as it. Like, for example, I'm looking at the center console screen, and the clock on it is correct, and then there's a little clock that's on the instrument cluster, and that was off, and it's just like, why aren't the two clocks synced, and it's stuff like that, or like quality control issues that they have, like the visor kept falling in front of my face, or the parking brake switch, when I went to pull the parking brake switch, the whole switch came out, and that's what people hate about them. They're not refined enough to where they're
but has that, but like, and again, I've been around, but not really been, intimately, in like 720S's, for instance. I guess when I look at a car like that is essentially, that's a third or fourth generation iteration now, of their super series, or, forgive me if I don't remember their terminology, but like, is that car more refined than, the 570 or the 675 or whatever?
It is, and I gotta say, I mean, since the 720 came out, it's been one of my dream cars, and like, I got the chance to drive one for the first time, and like, I was just blown away. And they have improved a lot, but it's still like, everything is not like dialed in on those cars yet. And it's something that'll come with time, like the new 760 LT that's coming out. It might be better than the 720 as far as refinement. And I hate the fact that they depreciate, because like it's horrible for the brand as an image. It scares away a lot of customers, because they're like, well, they've already depreciated 100 grand. What's it going to be worth in 2 more years? Yeah. And it scares people. I think 720, for what they're priced at right now in the 200s, low 200s, it's definitely the most car you can buy for the money. Like,
well, and I gotta think, do you think 720 owners are just pissed that the 760 already came out and already, like,
I'm sure
now they go on the slide that, like, I was looking at a 650S.
Yeah. Which is an awesome car, by the way. Like, my God.
You guys had one at the time I was looking at a couple of green ones out in Washington, and man, that's just a freaking cool car. And I love like the Targa roof and everything. Like, I mean, I was so like in love with it, but just so not in love with the idea of paying like the $5,000 a year in warranty, and also like just the what if that comes with buying a McLaren, unfortunately,
Yeah.
And again, it's just, I'm still at that lower end of the affordability spectrum, where it's just like, I can't get that bill for 10 or 15 or 20 grand for some random problem.
And Hassan, I also got to drive a 720S, and I will tell you, that is the most sublime car I've ever driven, period, hands down. I've driven a lot of cars. The 720S, best driving car ever. So I was at an event, and a guy had the 720S, and then he had a Huracan. And he goes, "Hey, Eric, which one do you want to drive?" I said, at a track. Okay, at a track for free. And he goes, "Which one do you want to drive?" And I said, "What's a better driving car?" Because this was a track event, and I wanted to drive in anger.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Drive the 720." My wife hopped in with me, and I took it at maybe 80% around the track.
Sure.
Holy shit, that is the best car I've ever driven, hands down, period. If money were no object, I would have a fleet of those.
Yeah, they're
when they work.
Yeah. I mean, and that's like the thing. Like, I had a friend of mine whose dad bought a 720, brand new from McLaren, 300 miles on it, and the seat controls on the side stopped working, and 300 miles on the car.
Well, but let's take a little different angle on this, okay? Because we acknowledge that, the when they work and everything, like, yes, they're a great car. Yeah. But again, I think going back to some of that early discussion, like with some of the Ferraris and things, when you've got these hand built or limited production or very independent manufacturer cars, whatever angle you want to look at it from, like we can acknowledge that 720, that is an amazing car. It's probably one of the best cars of this millennium. I guess we'll start there.
Easily.
But the thing of it is like, do we sort of give it the mulligan to say like, yeah, they're quirky and problematic, but yeah, when they work, they're like, oh my God.
Well, so I'll touch base on it. So like, I'll give a disclaimer. The McLaren F1 is my favorite car of all time, period.
Fair enough.
The modern McLarens, I consider them a mass production science project.
I have heard you say that before.
And essentially what it is that it's a mad team of scientists that don't have the greatest, what is it called? The research and development budget in order to like perfect the things. But when those guys come up with an idea of how to make the car a little bit faster, which happens every 6 months, they come out with a new model. So long-term, the 720, when it works, is a phenomenal car. And I've had the pleasure of I've had the experience of driving with upgraded turbos and like stupid fast, and the chassis handles incredibly.
Yep. That's why you have a fleet of them. So in case one breaks down, you just go get parts.
There you go. There you go.
All I know is that the 720 Spider that Randy has, it was delivered when we took delivery of it. We had a check engine light on the way home. Like brand new car.
Probably doing burnouts in it, but I'm just
kidding. No, it wasn't.
Blame the customer.
I think it was like a front. I think it was a front lift suspension.
Left.
Since then, the Spider, the doors don't open sometimes. I mean, there's issues. And the modern cars, I think the McLarens, the 720 is amazing for the money, but I think that car is going to be eventually $120,000 just because of the reliability factor.
And isn't that just astounding to think about that car is going to be that car is going to be the price of like a Gallardo or a really nice
but you have to make sure that when you buy that car for $120,000, it has the extended McLaren factory warranty. Otherwise, you're going to be.
Let's talk about that though, because again, that point in time is not now. That point in time is, let's say it's 5 years from now, maybe it's 2 years from now, the way McLarens go, but like it's a few years from now, right? Now, if you've got a car that actually is driven, is used, one would hope that some of those issues would be worked out. I kind of think of 570s like that, that like over time, aren't some of those things going to be dealt with?
Nope.
By the first owner, no?
No, I think they're just going to be.
No, yeah, I agree. I agree.
The 720 has inclement issues. Like for example, like my personal modern day favorite McLaren is a 675 LP because it still has the mono Viper, and it feels like kind of like when you drive it, like I guess it's like, I've never driven a McLaren F1. Still kind of feel the closest to the McLaren F1 experience in my imagination because I've never driven one or been in one. But the modern day ones, like they become better. The 720, I took it to the tail of the Dragon, for example. On the tail of the Dragon, I cracked all of the roof panels cracked on the tail of the Dragon. I did the run like 3 times, and the reason why that happens is that because it has the carbon fiber tub, and like modern cars, like for example the Ferrari or whatever, they have the tubs, but there's still a space issue when you mount the glass to the car. McLaren does not understand the fact that you can't mount glass to the carbon fiber tub with no separation, because when the car flexes and the tail of the Dragon is 30, 40 mile an hour turn, and like they're kind of concave, so like you're kind of the front end.
I remember,
where does that stress go? It goes straight to the glass. So if you look at the 720s, they all suffer front glass stress fractures, and if you try to get another windshield from McLaren, it's like a 4-month waiting list.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, okay, so McLarens are McLarens. We kind of know this. Yeah, I mean, I think I am curious to see what it will look like from a collectability standpoint for those cars. Given that the depreciation is there, like those things are at some point they're going to be a steal. But the question is, are they inherently flawed, or are they, you know, a worthy car to be in a collection?
I think the current price values speak everything. Look at the 675 LT values versus everything else, and look at the McLaren F1 values.
They're not going to be Maserati level of depreciation. Speaking of piles of shit, but yeah, McLaren just has too many gremlins and just weird gremlins and I think you will find the weird oddball eccentric guy who will collect them, but mass appeal, no, I don't think you're going to find it.
Well,
even like their hypercars, sorry to cut you off. I mean, like the P1s out of like the Holy Trinity cars, the P1s aren't up there, like the LaFerrari and the 918 Spider. I think one sold at Barrett Jackson for under $1 million. And now there's McLaren Sennas out there that are selling for under $1 million, which is, you know, it's a hypercar that's not holding value.
The Senna is an interesting example, because I look at it like from a look standpoint, it's like in a weird kind of way, it's like the modern Countach, you know, like it's this really weird fugly design, but it's got great performance. I don't know how they are from a reliability or a gremlins perspective, but.
And I think what you just mentioned is the perfect example of the mass production science project. Is that the P1 is slower than the 720?
Yeah.
So how can you have a car that is 2 years old, essentially, or 3 years old, or 4 years old, that's supposedly the hyper level car, being outpaced by the 720?
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
I heard Manny Cushman talk about that. Yeah, that like, I mean,
like, why is that 40 so expensive? Because any regular Ferrari doesn't outperform it until you get to like the Speciale or whatever it is.
That's true.
You got to admit, that's a damn good looking car, though.
It is. Yeah, I agree. I love the look of McLaren's here. Like this one, actually, that one right there. That's actually from you guys too. That's from a Wheels Boutique car, and like it's a 600 LT with under 800 miles, but it's just, you know, it's an LT car that no one wants because like it's just like
because McLaren moved on.
Yeah,
and exactly. they did it really quickly. Yeah, so I mean,
for the same money, you can buy a 720, and it's like it's a faster car. But like, why would you want it?
Well, let's talk about another interesting one here in the interest of time here. I'm curious, you know, and Hassan, this will be close to your heart. You know, let's talk about Corvettes. Let's go domestic for a minute. Okay. Now, obviously, everybody's got C8 mania right now.
Yeah.
You know, I think, you know, especially in 2020, given the special circumstances, I think that these year 20 C8s, I think, are going to be a thing now long term, because they're sort of
the production numbers.
Yeah, they're such a low production number because of COVID and everything. You know, I mean, I've heard there's only going to be what is it, a few thousand made this year?
2,800 or something like that.
Right. Yeah. Versus whatever they're supposed to make, 20 or 30,000, whatever the number was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, from that standpoint, I mean, I think those cars are going to be rare. I mean, but again, there's going to be a bajillion of them over the next, you know, however many years they're going to make this iteration of it. But, you know, when we look back now, I mean, I think we were talking in a previous podcast about how like the C7 is like one of the best bargains now for like, you know, a crazy 100%. Performance.
Yes,
car,
it is.
You know, I mean,
Yeah.
But I mean, from like from a collectability standpoint, I mean, again, putting the C8 aside, because it, you know, again, there's some special circumstances now to why I think those first ones are going to be special. I mean, do we look at anything about like the C7, the C6? You know, does anything about that stand out as a collector other than sentimentality?
I think. Oh, good. I think they made too many C7s. You know, like
you think?
Yeah,
they sold a lot too.
They sold a lot, exactly.
A lot of them left though. Yeah, I mean,
but it's nice that they made the C7 ZR1 very low produced, which, you know, those cars are still holding values compared to like a Z06. I have a Z06 and I love that car. It's just shy of 1,000 horsepower and it's got a manual transmission, and that car is just probably one of the, you know, best cars I've ever driven. And you know, it sucks to see their values at what they're at right now, but it's nice to see that they did make an exclusive. They only made 2,400 C7 ZR1s, which is half of what they made for C6 ZR1s. And that's what I was originally going to buy, but I dailied my C7 Z06, my first one. I dailied it for 3 months almost, and I didn't want to have a C6 interior to look at every day.
Did the ZR1 come in manual?
Which one? The C7?
Yeah.
And they only made like 700 or 800 of them total.
See, and I think that's going to be the collector part, is that in the future,
100%.
like the most cars, because they're all automatic, they're making thousands and thousands of automatics. There's nothing separating them from manual or automatic. So
they'll still do all right, but even right now, like if you're in the market for a C7 ZR1, you'll see that the automatics are like 20 grand under sticker, and the manuals are still selling for sticker.
Yeah, and that's why I think like the C8 is like not offering a 3-pedal C8. I think is a massive mistake on the GM part.
Yeah.
Because I think that the automatic, like, I mean, if you see the C8s, they're having the dual clutch issues already. Like it's pretty predominant issue.
Mm-hmm.
Me personally, I think that the C6 Z06 with the natural aspirated 427.
That's a pure, and those have been jumping up in value too.
Yep. Those are going to be worth a lot of money, especially the convertible version of 2011, I think, in 2012.
Yeah, the 427 edition.
So the 427 edition convertibles and the C5 Z06s, which are the most pure Corvettes, I think are going to go up.
Yeah.
So I actually have a very rare C6 Z06, and I'm curious,
edition, isn't it?
No, it's actually the year after the carbon edition.
Okay.
But it's essentially a spec carbon edition. But it's one of 60. There's a guy who collects just the VIN numbers of these Z07 package C6s. So,
gee, where does he put those, Eric?
I don't know where he collects them, but he's got them.
I was setting you up for the Vinwiki plug there. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, well, I ironically just wearing the shirt. I don't know. I don't make any money off of that. That's Ed's deal.
I'm joking.
True. But I kind of found it by accident because I wanted a car with carbon brakes, and I talked to a friend of mine, Jeff Schwartz, who had a C6 Z07.
Oh, I know Jeff.
C7 Z07, and he was having overheating issues, and that's the only way I could beat him on the racetrack, because his car overheated. But he said, Eric, if you're going to get a car with carbon brakes, man. And I found this. It was a Centennial.
Nice. Wow.
Z06.
There we go.
Yep. So I have a 1 of 60 C6 Z07. Every single option. So it's got the hood, the raised hood, the skirts, and the carbon brakes. And then the heads were done, of course, because you gotta do
that.
Regardless of I that's not something I think is going to hurt value in the future of those cars, just because it's a ticking time bomb anyway. But I'm curious to know, between you two guys, if you're Corvette guys, do you think that's something that may go up? Because people are saying, oh, the ZR1 is so much better than the Z06, but there's less of what I bought made. There it is. Yeah, there it is.
Look at the current values of like, do you remember, like, everybody always talks about the 60s Corvette, the 505 horsepower naturally aspirated 427 Corvette. Was it C2, I think, or C1? I think it was C2. It was a C2, the 427. Yep, and it was the highest. Yep, and it was the highest naturally aspirated horsepower Corvette ever made until the C6 Z06 came out. I think that the supercharged motors, I don't think that they're going to be valued as much. But however, I think that the C6 ZR1 is going to be worth more than the C7 ZR1, because it's a more of a driver's raw feeling car. And it was more technologically advanced, because the C6 ZR1, for example, had the Enzo brakes and the ceramic, it was just mental for the time. But I do think that the 427 is going to be a special place in GM history, because it's a reiteration of the 60s, and it's a much thing. And like, if you guys watch Savage Garage, like Nowitzki, I convinced him to get the Z06. And if you go to like East Coast Supercharging, it's $1,800 or like $2,200 to do the heads and address all those issues and nothing else, and you'll never have to worry about it ever again.
Yeah, John, you might like this.
Crazy
My
stuff.
Corvette has those brakes that you were talking about.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
so
you-
I have the Z07 package. It was a $10,000 option.
Yep.
I have
Yeah.
a Z06 that was $105,000 from the factory.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's
And it
pretty-
wasn't the regular Enzo brakes. It was the Enzo FXX brakes, which was insane.
Yep. I can go 60 to 0 in 80 feet.
Yeah, which is better than any modern car now, basically.
It's
Freaking amazing.
Yep.
It's
Let me-
crazy that the Z07 dropped, I think, like almost 18 seconds around the Nürburgring.
Yep.
And it's it's the lightest Corvette you could buy, I believe.
Probably.
And yeah, the last 427 here, the last Z07 car C6 I had sold within 6 hours. It was supersonic blue,
Ooh,
and it had
nice.
40,000 miles, and it sold in 6 hours of being listed.
Really?
That's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, there's such a hot demand. I'm car shopping for inventory, and those Z07 cars are selling still for like $60,000 with like 35,000 miles, which is absurd.
Well, Hassan,
Yeah.
I've got a one of 60 that
Yeah.
if you want it, it is for sale. Everything's got a price. I'm just saying.
I'll message
Everything has
you.
a price.
Sure. Yeah. We'll talk about it.
Let me ask you one question really quick. Armando that's watching had a question about the C8, kind of talking about, the depreciation on them. And I think it's hard to read the tea leaves there, but I mean, I see that they're selling for, a real surplus right now, obviously just because of lack of
they are.
availability. But once we get into next year and the year after, depending on how long this generation lasts, which given the
They're gonna
Corvette,
tank.
probably, it's going to be a while.
2026 at least, I would think.
Yeah. So, I mean, certainly those prices are going to come down, but you're just going to have to be a patient guy and wait a few years pretty much.
Look at the Supra,
Yeah.
Yeah.
The new one or the old one?
the new one. They can't get rid of them.
Yeah, they can't sell them. They're
Yeah.
But I guess the difference, I think, and again, I'm just interpreting this. I mean, other than the fact that, the whole, it's a BMW joke aside, but I mean, the knock I've heard on them is
not a
that they're just-
joke.
no, I know it's not, but I mean, but the knock I've heard on them is that they're just really underpowered,
Yes.
The-
Yeah, and
the-
they are.
the C8 is, I think it's pretty crazy. Like, we're selling them for quite a bit over sticker, but we're
Yeah.
also paying over sticker to get them in inventory.
Mhm.
And, at the end of the day, it's a Stingray. So, it's a base model. I don't know what the craze is about because the Z06s, and I'm actually on the list for Z06. I have a friend who works at a Chevy store and he put me on there. So
Yeah.
he's like, you're second in line now. I wish I was
Yeah,
first.
but you got to understand though. I mean, dudes have been in their jorts and New Balances waiting for that thing for how many
That's true.
years, and they never
That's
knew that they were going to see it.
Yeah.
That's
I
not
think-
my grandfather's Corvette. It's front wheel, it's front engine and rear wheel drive. Ugly. This mid-engine crap, you take that to
Ugly.
Europe.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if it's true, but I think that the C8, the values, whatever it is going to just absolutely tank when the Z06 comes out.
Yes.
Because
totally.
the rumor is it's a flat crank V8,
Yeah.
Yep.
and if it is, oh my God, GM's gonna
No.
sell so many of those.
And I just drove a C8, and that was my only complaint about the car, that it doesn't have a shrieking high pitched engine noise. It sounds like a C7, and I mean that's not a bad
Yeah.
thing. Don't get me wrong, but like it's missing that thrill of being a mid-engine supercar, and that's when I decided I'm like, all right, I'm getting on the C8 Z06 list.
Right.
The Z06 is going to be ridiculous.
It is.
I'll wait for it because you guys are totally right. The rumors I've heard from people over at GM, I've got some friends over at GM, but they're telling me, there's a twin turbo version in the works.
Yeah.
The ZR1.
Yeah, 1,000 horse twin turbo.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hybrid supposedly too, but
Yep.
God, that thing's gonna weigh so much, and that worries me.
But here's the thing that's going to be the issue for that car is that by the time it comes out, it's going to probably be like the ZR1 is what, $180,000 now. So you're looking at a $240,000 sticker probably for the
No, the ZR1, the C7 ZR1 started at 119, and optioned out you get up to 142, and
Mhm.
and that's like, if you look at the C6 ZR1 for when it came out, that thing was $113,000 or $115,000. So
Yeah.
it hasn't jumped that much, And even like, you know, if you compare C8 starting price.
63.
Well, you
Yeah.
know, but hold on. You know, I think the thing of it is though, there's really again it's like I said, going back to that, you know, that split on these collectors where you've got the guys that are into like American muscle versus the guys that are into European supercars. For the American collector, that version of that vet, that's going to be like buying, you know, their Ferrari. That's Everest to them, you know what I mean?
agree. Yeah.
Have you guys ever I don't know if you remember when the C8 was in development and it was going to the Nürburgring. Do you remember like the production got delayed due to the rear engine glass cracking under stress?
Yeah, I remember those rumors. Yeah,
that really concerns me because you figure that delayed the progress, so they probably put a couple of reinforcement bars. Now imagine them adding another like 200-300 horsepower for the Z06 and then adding another 200-300 horsepower on top of that for the ZR1. I just don't think that this chassis is meant to be, it's their first experiment.
It is.
Like the
yeah.
C9.
And that is worrisome.
The C9 is going to be insane.
Yeah.
no, I agree.
Figure it'd probably at that point though. I mean, given where we'll be just in time, I mean, I would imagine they'll have to go hybrid at that point at least, you know.
Well, the nice thing about GM though is they'll the C5 was for 10 years or so, and then the C6, which was another, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. So I mean, you get by the end pretty good cars. You know, the last run of the C6s, the 10, 11, 12, 13s, you can beat the living crap out of, and they're great. But the first run of them, they're okay.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing too. The C8, it's an entirely new car. I know they called it a Corvette, but it's its whole own thing. It's not a progression from anything. And anytime you're talking about a first generation or something, you know, there's going to be those issues. So, from that standpoint, I'm not surprised. And again, unfortunately, you know, we're finding, you know, McLaren again does that every 6 months, you know, kind of where they start over and then they go through all these issues, you know, but there's only, you know, it's going to take some time to progress, and whether they do it as incremental facelifts or just go to the C9 at some point.
And the reason why they probably did the mid-engine thing is that they had to do it is because the Camaro performance and the price difference was getting too close for the
There were 3 seconds apart around Nürburgring.
Yeah, you've seen those Camaro rear engine mock-ups though, haven't you?
Yeah.
Well, honestly, my theory is the ALMS or the American Le Mans series.
Mm-hmm.
They were getting their ass handed to them by the Ford GTs, and they literally could not engineer any more performance into the C7 at all. So my theory is they were getting their ass kicked in racing at Le Mans, at Sebring, and the Ford was just kicking their ass left and right. So I think they were forced to do it based on that fact alone, that Ford came out with a mid-engine car and kicked their ass.
Imagine that racing inspiring a new design that comes out and like.
I'm serious. I think that has something to do with it.
It's Ford versus Ferrari all over again, right?
Because if you
look at all the fastest cars around the Nürburgring, I think the Viper and the Vet were like the fastest front engine cars left in that category.
Yep, and it's starting to tick down.
Yeah, and I hate Nürburgring times because of all the different variables, but like at the end of the day, people brag about it. It sells cars.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
You know. So
what were you going to say,
I'll be
John?
honest, I cared about it.
What were you going to say, John?
The Corvette, I think the C8, like they had to do mid-engine because they outpaced the technology of their suspensions and the chassis. Because even the C7, it was still leaf spring suspension. And I don't know if you've ever driven a C5 or C6 or C7 with a coilover conversion. It's a completely different car. And I think that because like look at the tire sizes on the C7. It's like everybody's like, oh, it's a great bang for the buck. But if you buy a used $50,000 C7 Z06, you're going to be spending $2,000 in tires every 6 months.
Well, let's kind of cap that there. Certainly again, Corvette is that is a topic we could go super deep on if we wanted to for a whole episode. And, I'll be sure to get this group back together to talk about that again. That's I'll make that promise right now. But when we think about the collector market and, a car maybe that hasn't had its time yet here, give me an example you can think of, something we haven't talked about that you think, whether it's a quirky whatever car or a hyper car, what is kind of maybe one other example we haven't talked about from each of you that that you think, you know, is going to have its day either soon or coming up, and is going to really, you know, take off. Hassan, any ideas?
I mean, you know, it's for me, it's hard to say, but like, I think Dodge Vipers, you know, will definitely, they'll probably be up there someday. It's just like,
Which version though?
The Gen 5s really do it for me. And like, you know, they're more refined than all the previous generations. I know people love the 4th gen and the 2nd gen a lot, but you know, it just looking at the values of you know, the Gen 5s, they're still selling for what they were pretty much new.
Yep.
And you know, just once again, working at Chicago Motor Cars, I've experienced a lot of first-time drives with these cars, and like I drove a Viper for the first time, and it's definitely, you know, on my list of one day to own, just because like the way the car, it's still such an analog car. It's a V10, which an 8.4 liter V10, which will probably never exist again, and just the power delivery of the car is like, it's actually really good. Like, it's got such a broad torque curve that like it puts the power down and is a very well balanced car. And you know, it's a purist car in my opinion. It's the last purist American, like the C6Z06. You know, it was the last 427. The Viper was the last V10 muscle car that we'll probably ever have.
That Lamborghini designed.
And largest engine ever produced.
That Lamborghini designed. Yeah.
Largest engine ever produced.
So John, for you, like what's a car we haven't talked about, or either a brand or a specific car we haven't talked about that you think is going to really be a collector darling going forward?
I made a big mistake in my past. I used to have E63 M6 BMW in stick shift coupe, and I sold it. That was a big mistake. In my opinion, the M6, M5, V10, and manual is gonna just absolutely skyrocket in the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay, I'll give a shout out to Brendan M6, a buddy of mine with an M6. Those are pretty damn quick cars.
Yep. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with them. Europe, nobody else in the world got a manual V10, M5, or M6. It was North American only car. It was US and Canada and also Mexico. There was a total of 320 E63 M6 coupes ever produced in manual. And there was another 360 convertibles produced in manual. And then there was, I think, 800 or 900 M5 V10 manuals for the North American market produced in manual. Once the whole import-export expiration date expires, you're eliminating all of the SMG
things are going to go crazy, right? It's going to be like GTR fever, right?
Yep. You're eliminating all of the import-export things. You're eliminating all of the SMG problems with SMG pumps and the clutches and all that stuff. And you have that V10, which is the only V10 that BMW ever made. I think those things, I mean, look at the E39 M5 values. Look at like all the E30 M3 values. I think that V10 M5 M6 is going to be a $200,000 car, $250,000 car, eventually with low mileage. Period.
Wow. Okay. Eric, what about you?
So I was thinking about this while you guys were talking, and I think what you're gonna be hard pressed to find, and this is not going to be $1 million car by any stretch of the imagination. But I think collectible though. And it's going to be hard to find a good example that's going to be left is a early 2000s Trans Am WS6.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because, and here's why: people, when they bought them, drove them, and they modified them, and they, you know, put turbos on them, and they put superchargers, and they did this and they did that. So to find one that's going to be in good condition, because again, it didn't have all the fancy electronics. It had ABS, fine, but it has a manual. It was a V8. It was rear-wheel drive. It looked like it wanted to just devour you. I mean, like the hood, the little four hood scoops, you know, on the front, looked like they wanted to eat something. You know, it looked angry, and I think a lot of people remember that as just they're angry cars, And
And the
so to
taillights,
find
and the taillights
a
at night.
example, say again.
And the taillights at
Yeah,
night look phenomenal.
Yeah, the honeycomb.
look at
thing.
that right there.
Yeah.
I think just to find a
Yep.
there it is, that big hood scoop.
Yeah.
And just look mean and aggressive. And I think to find a pristine, unmolested version of that in the next 5 to 10 years is gonna be tough.
Probably pristine. I think they've all been molested, but that's beside the
But I think that that's the biggest misconception of
and it's like some
electric cars.
16-year-old driving it, of course.
But
Of course,
that's
right.
the biggest misconception. I think there's a big misconception with electric cars, and like anybody who's watching, is that like it doesn't matter the budget, because like, let's say you're looking at a car that let's just say you're looking at a car that's $1 million, and if it goes up to 1.1 million, it's better to buy the car that goes from 15,000 to 30,000.
Yeah.
Because the percentages wise, it goes up more, and that's where like I want everybody to understand, that whoever is watching, is that it's all perspective, and like, it doesn't mean that you have to spend millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars. There's buys out there like 944 turbo that's like 7,000 like 4 years ago. That's 20,000 now. That's
you're absolutely
more
right.
than doubling your money.
No, you're absolutely right. And I mean, I know a lot of guys that are into classic Audis, and same thing with some of the RS4s and the old RS6s and things like that. And, you know, and even some of the earlier models are different variants. And yeah, they don't have to be cars that, you know, you could be 20 grand into it, you know, but like you pick right, you pick smart, and like you can definitely turn a profit on that if that's what you're trying to do, or, you know, just get a good car at a good value.
Yeah, and that's one of the, it's odd that you actually mentioned the Audis, is because I've been looking for the last 2 years, and there's just, you can't find them. Try to find a B5 S4 with under 40,000 miles.
Yeah.
That's manual,
my buddy just
not automatic.
but I don't know how many miles it has on it though. But yeah, no, I mean I know the guys are fanatical for him though, for sure, you know. And I mean, I'm kind of a little bit of a fair weather Audi guy, because I started like with A7s and then went up to an R8, and like I sort of missed some of the craze with some of the earlier you know, the RS4 madness and all of that. You know, it's just never kind of been my thing, but I know people are just absolutely gonzo for them.
Well, I think it's just a matter of time before people price out the original one. Like, you're looking at the M cars. I mean, let's look at the Japanese market. Like, I mean, you have the Supra because the Fast and Furious craze that went up crazy.
Yeah.
The next cars that people look at is the RX-7, let's say. And you've seen the RX-7 values go up. I think that another car that's undervalued is 3000 GT. And it's the same thing with the German market. That you have the M models are going skyrocket. But what is everybody else going to look at next? It's going to be the Audi.
All I'm going to say is, if you buy a VR4, just buy a whole stack of clutches, so that when you blow them up, you just, you know, grab one off the pile and put it on.
Yep.
Well, guys, on that note, I think we're gonna wrap it up there. Way to bring it home, Eric. Hey, look, I appreciate your guys' time. Certainly, John, you know, people in the Miami area, hit up Detail Boutique, check out Savage Garage on YouTube. Love that channel. And you guys, you know, good times. Looking forward to seeing what you guys will be up to. Hassan, Chicago Motor Cars, thanks for coming. And you know, if anybody needs a car pretty much anywhere in the United States, you know, give Chicago Motor Cars a shout on any social media network or on the web. And Eric, man of many talents, you know, check out the in progress chair set. Check out you know, the books, your books on Amazon. You know, your stints on Vinwiki. Like, we could go on and on, man. Appreciate all you guys coming out, and everybody have a great one. And to everybody watching or who will watch, thank you. Have a good night.
We'll have to do it
Thank
again
you.
soon.
Yep.
Thanks, guys.